Donald Trump's transition is downplaying the significance of a phone call he had Friday with the president of Taiwan. But foreign policy experts say that one phone call has shattered decades of diplomatic protocol about the U.S. approach toward China and Taiwan. The U.S. formally broke off diplomatic relations with Taiwan in 1979, and the National Security Council was forced to affirm on Friday that the U.S. is not changing its policy. Former Ambassador Chris Hill posted this tweet after the news broke. "This is an example of winging it in the extreme. Hope Trump doesn't feel he has to double down on this judgment error." Ambassador Hill is also Dean of the Joseph Corbell School of International Studies at the University of Denver. He's with us now by phone from Tampa, Florida. Ambassador, thanks for being with us.
Pleasure.
If you could just explain, first of all, why, in your view, this is an extreme judgment error.
Well, the problem is, many of these countries have extraordinary complexities, but there is probably no complexity greater than the deal set up by Henry Kissinger, essentially to manage our relations with China. Up until the 70s, of course, we had recognized Taiwan as the official seat of China, and then we went to a so-called one China policy where we recognized Beijing. And so in addition to that one China policy, we also had something called the Taiwan Relations Act. That is, we would continue unofficial relations with Taiwan, including arms sales. But with the one China policy, we don't talk to the Taiwanese on an official basis. And that's what President Trump, that's what he broke. And he broke something that had been going on for some 38 years. He broke something that Ronald Reagan adhered to, that George Bush Sr. adhered to, Bill Clinton, George Bush Jr. He broke something that had been really enjoyed wide bipartisan support. So the issue is, where do we go from here? Some of his surrogates are saying he meant to break it. And then you have to ask yourself the question, with all the problems in the world, some of which you've just talked about in your news program, do we really now need a crisis with China? And one hopes that he doesn't double down and suggest that, yes, I'm looking to pick a fight with China.
Ambassador, Vice President-elect Mike Pence went on several Sunday shows to call this a quote-unquote courtesy call. Do you think that response and that explanation is sufficient?
I think it's the right way to go. It's not in keeping with the agreements with China over many years that there should be no discussions between the American president and the Taiwan president, because what today is a courtesy call could develop into something else. And so that is the reason they've never done it. But on the other hand, if Mike Pence and others are trying to downplay it and say, look, let's just move on, we're not trying to change policy, that's, I think, the right approach, because we need to work with China on some very serious problems. North Korea, the South China Sea, trade problems with China. We don't need a Taiwan problem as well. And when one talks about draining the swamp in Washington, I understand that point, but China policy has basically been on dry land for a long time. That is doing fine, and we don't need to drag that into the set of problems that I think the president-elect is taking on.
I wonder what you think, Ambassador, about Mr. Trump's own defense of the call. On Twitter Friday, he wrote, "Interesting how the U.S. sells Taiwan billions of dollars of military equipment, but I should not accept a congratulatory call." Does he have a point there?
I think anyone who has, for the first time, been read into the Taiwan Relations Act and the One China policy kind of looks at it and says, you mean we can't talk to them officially, but we can sell $1 billion worth of arms? So I understand where President-elect Trump is coming from on this. But, you know, there are some things that have lasted a long time, in this case 38 years, have been put together by some of the great diplomatic experts of all time, including Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski and Jimmy Carter and Richard Nixon. And so it works. And it may seem funny when you first look at it, but it works. And I think President-elect Trump needs to respect things that work, that aren't broken, that don't need to be fixed, and kind of move on to some of the issues that do need to be fixed.
On another topic, Ambassador, I want to ask you about the two critical votes in Europe Sunday. Austrians voted against right-wing candidate Norbert Hofer, who'd run on an anti-migrant platform and suggested he was open to leaving the European Union. In Italy, a referendum on streamlining parliament has become a rallying point for populist politicians hoping to replace Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. Sunday's vote in Austria was a redo of an election from May that was too close to call. The fact that the first contest was so close, what does that tell us?
Well, there is a lot of great frustration in Europe with the European Union and with its sort of management of these big issues that Europeans are dealing with. And of these big issues, one of them, of course, has been the onslaught of refugees from places like Syria. And so there's a great frustration among Europeans who say, look, we were happy to join the European Union. We were happy to join this civilizing concept of Europe, but we wanted to join Europe as a civilization, not join it as a bureaucracy. And so there's a great deal of frustration in Europe. I think the fact, though, that this Austrian election seems to be going in the direction of resisting this kind of hard right approach, I think is a good sign. Obviously, Mr. Renzi has his work cut out for him in Italy, because Italy has really felt the onslaught of this refugee flow, and there's great frustration in Italy. But on the other hand, many Italians understand that they have benefited tremendously from Italy's role in the European Union. So I think we have to wait and see. Obviously, Brexit kind of was a game changer, and then the election of Donald Trump, another game changer. So I think there's a concern that if things go against Renzi in Italy and for Hofer in Austria, that you could see some kind of unraveling. But so far, that's not happening.
All right, Ambassador Chris Hill, we appreciate your insight. Thank you.